Leadership isn't about position. It's not about title. It's not about having the final say or sitting at the head of the table. Real leadership is influence. It's presence. It's ownership. It's the way you move, the way you think, the way you serve, especially when no one is watching. Most people think they need to wait to lead. Wait until they're promoted. Wait until they're recognized. Wait until someone gives them permission. But leadership doesn't work like that. The world doesn't need more people waiting to be chosen. It needs people willing to choose themselves. You don't have to run a company to lead. You don't have to manage a team to lead. You lead in how you show up, in how you respond under pressure, in how you carry your values when no one's enforcing the rules. The greatest leaders don't talk about it. They live it, and their life becomes the evidence. Leadership starts with self. Before you guide others, you have to guide yourself. Before you hold others to a standard, you have to be the example of it. Before you ask people to trust you, they need to see that you trust yourself. If your words are loud but your habits are weak, people won't follow. If your standards are high in public but sloppy in private, your influence won't last. Because real leadership is built on consistency, on character, on clarity. And those things are revealed not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Leadership is a mirror. It reflects what's real. It reflects what's missing. And most of all, it reflects who you are under pressure. Not who you pretend to be when things are smooth, but who you are when the stakes are high and the margin for error is small. And this is why leadership isn't for everyone, because it requires you to go first. It requires you to do hard things before you ask others to do them. It requires you to carry more weight, not because you want control, but because you've chosen responsibility. But if you choose it, if you commit to becoming someone worth following, everything starts to shift. Your presence sharpens. Your impact multiplies. Your confidence deepens. Not because you're perfect, but because you're living with intention. This kind of leadership is rare. It's earned. It's built. And it changes not just your career, but your relationships, your habits, your legacy. Because once you start leading like this, you don't just change how you move. You change how others move around you. The first life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is to master yourself before you try to manage others. Because if you can't lead you can't lead anyone. You can try. You can give speeches. You can build plans. You can set expectations. But if you're not walking it, if you're not living it, it won't land. It won't last. People don't follow advice. They follow example. They follow consistency. They follow energy. They follow the one who sets the tone and holds the standard when everyone else drops it. And if that's not you, you can't expect influence to stick. Leadership begins when you stop asking who's in charge and start asking who's responsible. And that answer, if you're serious about becoming the kind of leader who makes a difference, it's always you. That means you manage your mood. You own your energy. You control your tone. You discipline your habits. You master your morning. You clean up your language. You take full responsibility for your internal state. Because that state spills into every decision, every room, every relationship. And this isn't glamorous. It's not a big moment on a stage. It's the small, daily, invisible stuff. The choices that don't get attention, the decisions that feel thankless, the habits that no one claps for. But that's where leadership's born. You can't be consistent in public if you're chaotic in private. You can't ask others for accountability if you haven't built it in yourself. You can't demand focus from your team if you haven't trained it in your own mind. The disconnect is obvious. And over time, people feel it. That's the kind of leader people lose respect for. Not the one who makes mistakes, but the one who doesn't own them. Not the one who falls, but the one who refuses to get back up. Not the one who's learning, but the one who's performing. People can feel the difference between someone who is leading because they've earned it and someone who is leading because they want the attention. The first type changes lives. The second type changes nothing. So before you set goals for your team, you set goals for yourself. Before you set expectations for others, you ask if your own life reflects those expectations. If you say excellence matters, where does your day show it? If you say ownership is everything, where are you modeling it? You don't wait for pressure to rise to get serious about self-leadership. You train when no one's watching, so that when it counts, your foundation holds. You do the reps. You do the reflection. You do the uncomfortable work of asking, where am I out of alignment? Where am I slipping? Where am I getting sloppy? And when you find those places, you don't run from them. You confront them with grace, not guilt, with ownership, not avoidance, with a desire to sharpen, not to shame. Because growth isn't about being perfect. It's about being committed. That commitment is what creates confidence, not hype, not charisma, but the quiet, real confidence that comes from knowing you've done the work, from knowing you've held yourself to the standard, from knowing that your words and your actions are finally aligned. And when that alignment happens, when your decisions match your declarations, you move with power. You don't need to talk about leadership. You embody it. You become someone who walks into the room and changes the temperature. Not because you demand it, but because your energy carries it. That's the work, the inner mastery, the private discipline, the invisible commitment before the meetings, before the presentations, before the strategy. It all begins inside. You don't build trust with a plan. You build it with presence. And your presence is shaped by how you lead you. Do you keep your word? Do you follow through? Do you show up with consistency, with intention, with respect for the work? Or are you hoping to outsource that responsibility to a title or a reputation that hasn't been earned? Self-leadership is a full-time job. You don't get to clock out. You don't get to lower the bar just because you're tired. You don't get to demand from others what you haven't developed in yourself. That's not leadership. That's hypocrisy. And the ones who get this, they become rare. They become reliable. They become rooted because they've built something real, not on talk, not on tactics, but on truth. They've become someone they themselves respect. You want to lead? Lead yourself. And don't do it for the applause. Don't do it for the title. Don't do it to prove anything. Do it because when your head hits the pillow, you want to know that you showed up with integrity, that your habits matched your values, that your choices matched your identity. The second life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is that communication isn't what you say, it's what they hear. And until you understand that, you'll keep confusing clarity with noise. You'll keep mistaking expression for influence. You'll think you're leading, but people won't be following. The gap between intention and interpretation is where most leadership breaks down. You meant one thing, they heard something else. You thought you were being clear, but they left confused. You assumed they got it, but they didn't. And the cost of that assumption is high. Because unclear communication creates friction. It creates frustration. It slows momentum. It builds tension where there should be trust. And over time, that erosion of clarity becomes an erosion of culture. People stop speaking up. They stop asking questions. They stop engaging. Not because they're lazy, but because they're lost. Clarity is leadership, period. If they don't understand what you expect, they can't deliver it. If they don't know what matters, they can't prioritize it. If they don't know where the target is, they can't aim. And if you're not creating that clarity, you're not leading. You're just making noise. Real leaders communicate for connection, not just control. They don't speak to be impressive. They speak to be understood. They don't flood people with information. They guide them to insight. They ask themselves, what does this person need from me right now in order to win? And then they give it. And this takes effort. It takes intention. Because most people speak on autopilot. They dump everything they know. They ramble. They over-explain. Or they under-explain. They don't adjust their message to the moment. They don't match the tone to the room. But great leaders, real leaders, they read the room before they speak into it. They slow down. They watch. They listen. They ask questions that reveal more than answers. They don't speak to fill space. They speak to move people. And when they speak, it lands. Not because it's flashy, but because it's felt. Because it's clear. Because it cuts through the noise. Because it meets people where they are and lifts them to where they need to be. You want to lead well? Then you have to get better at listening. Because listening is the foundation of all great communication. Not hearing to respond, listening to understand, listening without interrupting, listening without assumption, listening not just to their words, but to what's underneath them. Because people don't always say what they mean. They say what feels safe, what feels acceptable. And it's your job as a leader to create the kind of culture where they can be honest, where they can speak without fear, where they can contribute without editing themselves. That culture doesn't happen on accident. It's created by consistent clarity, by reinforcing truth, by modeling humility, by listening well, and by communicating with enough depth that people leave the conversation not just informed, but empowered. Because that's the goal. Not just that they heard you, but that they believe you. Not just that they listened, but that they feel aligned, that they're moving with you, that they're clear on what matters. And if they're not, that's your cue, not their failure. If they're confused, you take responsibility. You don't get defensive. You get better. You don't blame. You clarify. You reframe. You simplify until the path forward is unmistakable. Simplicity is the secret to clarity, and clarity is the engine of execution. When people know what matters, they move faster. They move smarter. They stop spinning in indecision. They stop second guessing. They stop waiting for permission. And that clarity, it starts with you, with how you think, with how you plan, with how you present. If your thoughts are scrambled, your team will be too. If your emotions are driving your words, people will feel it, even if your sentence is polished. So you get clear first. You slow your own thinking. You clean up your own emotion. You ask yourself, what outcome do I want from this conversation? And then you reverse engineer the words that will build that outcome. Not just for you, but for them. That's leadership. It's not just about what you say. It's about what you build with your words. It's about the space you create with your tone. It's about the momentum you generate with your focus. That kind of communication isn't just skill, it's service. Because when you speak clearly, you serve the mission, you serve the team, you serve the culture. You build more than buy-in, you build belief. And belief is what fuels the best teams, the best businesses, the best movements. The third life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is that consistency beats intensity. Because while intensity might impress people, it's consistency that transforms them. It's consistency that builds trust. It's consistency that turns movement into momentum and habits into identity. Most people start fast and fade. They sprint into a new routine, a new role, a new relationship with fire, but they don't last. They burn bright, then burn out. They show up loud for a week and then disappear. And the people around them, they feel that instability. If your energy can't be counted on, neither can your leadership. Because leadership is not about one great moment. It's not about a single breakthrough. It's about what you do over and over when no one's looking. It's about who you are in the middle, not just who you are at the start. Consistency is what builds credibility. It's what makes people trust your word. It's what makes your standards stick. Because the standard is not what you say in a meeting. It's what you reinforce with your behavior. It's what you correct. It's what you protect. You don't have to be perfect. But if your team doesn't know which version of you is going to show up today, that inconsistency becomes noise. It creates anxiety, and it quietly tells people, don't depend on me. I'm not grounded. And leadership that isn't grounded will always break under pressure. It may look impressive for a season. It may win early. But over time, inconsistency erodes everything. Trust, morale, culture, results. But the opposite is also true. When people know who you are, even on hard days, they start to move with more confidence. They stop guessing. They stop tiptoeing. Because your consistency has created stability. And that stability, that's rare. Because the world is inconsistent. Results are inconsistent. Emotions are inconsistent. But when you decide, I will show up the same way every day, regardless of how I feel, you give your people a rhythm to lean on. You give yourself structure. You give your mission durability. And you start to move from emotional to intentional, from reactive to reliable, from driven by mood to anchored by mission. Consistency isn't sexy, but it's everything. It's waking up and doing the work when it's boring. It's sticking to the plan when distractions show up. It's saying no to the quick hit in favor of the long game. And you train it. You train consistency like a muscle. You build routines. You create anchors. You stop chasing highs and start chasing discipline. You simplify your environment to make consistency easier. And then you keep going, especially when it's inconvenient, especially when the results are slow. That's where most people quit. They think it's not working because they're not seeing fireworks. But consistency doesn't shout. It compounds. It builds quietly. Until one day you look around and realize you're stronger, your team is sharper, your system is better, and it's all because you just didn't stop. And over time, people start to notice, not because you told them, but because your track record speaks louder than your words ever could. You become someone they can count on, someone they trust, someone who sets the pace, not just when things are good, but especially when they're not. That trust, that takes time. You don't build it in a day. You don't earn it with a single gesture. It's built through repetition, through showing up, through being the same person when it's storming as you are when the sun is out. And that's how culture is built. That's how teams are shaped. That's how movements grow. Not through bursts of brilliance, but through steady, deliberate repetition. Through the daily choice to keep your word, to bring the energy, to live the standard. You don't have to be extraordinary every day. You just have to be dependable. You just have to be committed. You just have to refuse to let inconsistency become your identity, because your people will never rise above the rhythm you've set. So set the rhythm. Show up when it's hard. Show up when it's boring. Show up when it's thankless. Show up when it's quiet. And if you keep doing that long enough, everything starts to move. Not because you pushed harder, but because you refused to break the pattern. The fourth life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is that your standards create your culture, not your slogans, not your goals, not your brand colors. The standard you live by, that's what builds the climate that everyone else has to breathe. Culture isn't something you say. It's something you allow. It's something you reinforce. It's something you tolerate or correct. And whether you like it or not, you're always creating culture. The only question is whether it's the one you meant to create. If you say excellence matters, but you allow laziness, the standard is laziness. If you say accountability is important, but you make excuses, the culture is excuses. If you say integrity is everything, but you cut corners when it's convenient, then that's the new norm. Because what gets repeated becomes real. And what gets tolerated becomes the temperature. People don't follow your words. They follow your patterns. They follow the pace you set, the energy you bring, the tone you use when things get hard. And the scary part is, most leaders don't realize they're teaching even when they're not talking. Every time you bend a rule, you teach. Every time you ignore poor effort, you teach. Every time you stay silent when something should be addressed, you teach. And over time, people stop listening to what you say. They listen to what you protect. The best cultures in the world, they're not built by accident. They're built by design. They're protected. They're reinforced. They're non-negotiable. They're not built on comfort. They're built on clarity. And clarity is the most underrated leadership tool on the planet, because unclear standards create inconsistent behavior. People want to perform, but they don't know what the target is. They want to be great, but they don't know where the lines are. So they guess, they hesitate, or they default to whatever is easiest, not because they're wrong, but because the culture wasn't clearly defined. It wasn't modeled. It wasn't owned. You want a high-performing team? You want a business that scales with excellence? You want a family that operates with intention? Then you have to raise the standard, and you have to live it first before you ask anyone else to do it. You can't outsource this part. You can't delegate culture. You are the culture. Your energy is the thermostat. Your standard is the baseline. Your behavior is the permission slip for everyone else. If you flinch, they'll fold. If you settle, they'll slide. But if you hold the line, they'll rise. Because people want to be called higher. They want to be part of something real, something clean, something built on truth, not politics. And when they know the standard is real, when they feel it, every time they walk through the door, they start to protect it too. They start to police themselves. They start to reinforce it for each other. That's how you know the culture is strong. Not because you bark orders, but because you've built belief. Because you've created an environment where people can trust that the values don't shift when it's inconvenient. That the same principles apply on Friday afternoon as they do Monday morning. That kind of consistency is rare. But when it's there, when the culture is alive and the standard is real, people flourish. They think better. They move faster. They hold each other up. They get sharper just by being in the room. And yes, it takes effort to build that. It takes sacrifice. It takes saying no to what's popular in order to protect what's true. It takes hard conversations. It takes follow-through. But the payoff, it's real. You get a place where people don't just perform, they grow. Where people don't just show up, they buy in. Where the standard becomes not just a rule, but a rhythm. And when that rhythm gets strong, it starts to multiply. It scales. It sustains. It becomes legacy. The fifth life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is that you can't give what you don't have. And if you don't fill your own tank, eventually you'll have nothing left to offer. That's not selfish. That's stewardship. It's responsibility. It's leadership at its most honest level. Because leadership costs energy. It costs focus. It costs presence. And you can't bring those things if you're constantly drained, burned out, running on fumes. People think that being a great leader means giving endlessly, pouring into everyone else until you collapse. But that's not service. That's self-sabotage. Your people don't need you depleted. They need you full. They need you whole. They need you present. And that starts with how you take care of yourself. Not once in a while, but every day. The food you eat, the sleep you prioritize, the space you protect, the thoughts you allow. You don't wait until you crash to rest. You don't wait until your mind breaks to reflect. You don't wait until your body shuts down to reset. You lead from overflow, not from deficit. You lead by example, not by exhaustion. This means you have to be honest with yourself about what you need. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Because leadership is heavy. It carries weight. And if you're not rooted, you'll get tossed. If you're not full, you'll eventually go numb. And numb leaders make dangerous decisions. They move fast, but without connection. They perform, but without purpose. They speak, but without impact. Because there's no depth, only survival. And survival mode is not leadership. Leadership requires clarity, presence, energy. And if you're not investing in your own clarity, presence, and energy, you are setting yourself up to fail the people who trust you. So what does this look like in real life? It looks like setting boundaries, not just with others, but with yourself. It looks like saying no to the things that pull you out of alignment. It looks like unplugging when your soul is tired. It looks like protecting time to think, not just to do. It looks like feeding your body like you actually respect it, training it like it matters, resting it like it deserves recovery, not out of vanity, but because your body is the engine of your mission. If you don't take care of it, your mission suffers. It looks like reading, journaling, praying, meditating, whatever it takes to keep your mind from being owned by stress, whatever it takes to stay centered, not scattered, focused, not frantic. Because if your thoughts are noisy, your leadership will be too. And here's the key. This isn't about self-care as a trend. It's about responsibility. It's about understanding that you are your greatest asset. Your mind, your energy, your soul. You protect those things not because you're soft, but because you're wise. Because you know that when you're sharp, your team wins. When you're grounded, your business grows. When you're energized, your family flourishes. Everything you lead benefits from you being at your best, not your limit. This doesn't mean you avoid hard work. It doesn't mean you get lazy. It means you stay intentional. It means you stop romanticizing burnout and start normalizing sustainability. It means you value longevity more than likes. You lead better when you feel better. And the better you feel, the more you can give, not just in quantity, but in quality. The conversations are deeper. The work is more focused. The energy is clean, and that matters. It matters more than you think. So fill the tank before it's empty, and then keep filling it daily, not once a quarter when you're falling apart, daily. Because consistency isn't just what you give to others, it's what you give to yourself. Protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. Don't hand it to every text, every email, every distraction that knocks on your door. Be selective, be focused, be grounded, because everything you're building depends on the version of you that shows up. And when you show up full, rooted, clear, you don't have to push people. Your presence pulls them. You don't have to fake passion. It's felt. You don't have to explain your standard. It's obvious. Because who you are always speaks louder than what you say. The sixth life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is that feedback is not a threat. It's a gift, but only if you're willing to receive it. Because how you respond to feedback reveals whether you're leading from ego or from growth. Most people think they're open to feedback until they hear something they don't like. Until someone tells them the truth with no sugarcoat. Until someone holds up a mirror that shows a blind spot they weren't ready to face. And in that moment, the temptation is to shut down, to get defensive, to explain, to justify, to protect your image. But real leaders don't protect their image. They protect their growth. And growth requires truth. Feedback is how you find the gaps, the inconsistencies, the blind spots. The behaviors you've normalized but haven't realized are costing you trust, energy, momentum. Feedback is how you accelerate. But if you only listen when it's easy, you'll miss the gold. Because real feedback isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it stings. Sometimes it confronts your patterns. But it always reveals something valuable. It gives you a chance to evolve, to get sharper, stronger, better. And the best leaders, the ones who keep getting better year after year, they don't just tolerate feedback. They seek it. They welcome it. They build cultures where it flows freely because they're more committed to growth than comfort. That kind of leader doesn't need to be right all the time. They don't need to have the last word. They don't need to control every room. They're secure enough to say, tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what I can do better. And that security, it's not weakness, it's strength. Because only someone who knows who they are can receive correction without crumbling. Only someone who's rooted can be stretched without snapping. So you train yourself. You get used to hearing hard things. You learn to breathe through the discomfort. You learn to separate the content from the delivery. You stop needing the tone to be perfect in order to receive the truth. You sift through feedback like a leader. You take what's helpful. You discard what's noise. You don't personalize everything, but you don't dismiss everything either. You're discerning. You're coachable. You're always learning. And when you live that way, everything starts to shift. Your communication improves. Your leadership deepens. Your influence grows. Not because you're flawless, but because you're constantly refining. You stop being afraid of correction because you know it's not rejection. You stop avoiding feedback because you know it's not failure. It's information. It's data. It's insight you didn't have before. And now you do. So you use it. And when people see that, when they see you take feedback and apply it, they start trusting you more, not less. Because they know you're not above learning. They know you're not too proud to grow. They know your ego isn't running the show. That trust is rare, but it's magnetic. It creates culture. It inspires your team to grow too. Because when they see you lean into feedback, they start leaning in too. They stop hiding their mistakes. They start asking better questions. They stop pretending they know everything. And now you have something powerful, a culture that's not built on performance, but on progress, not on pretending, but on learning, a space where feedback isn't feared, it's honored. And when you build that culture inside your business, inside your family, inside your own mind, you never stop evolving. You never stop improving. You never stop leveling up. Because now every conversation becomes a catalyst. Every interaction becomes an invitation to grow. So you ask for feedback. You don't wait for it. You don't hide from it. You seek it out. Not because you need validation, but because you're committed to mastery. And mastery only comes when you stop protecting your ego and start prioritizing your potential. The seventh life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is that leadership is a service, not a spotlight. And the moment you start chasing recognition more than responsibility, you stop leading. Because real leadership is not about being seen, it's about seeing others. It's not about your status, it's about your stewardship. You're not in the position to be the star. You're in the position to lift others, to build others, to serve others. And if you miss that, if you forget that, you start using people instead of empowering them. You start performing instead of leading. You start chasing applause instead of building trust. Real leaders don't need the credit. They don't need the stage. They're driven by impact, not ego. They know that when the mission wins, everyone wins. They know that when they make others better, the whole thing gets stronger. That's what service looks like. It looks like showing up early and staying late. It looks like doing the work no one sees. It looks like protecting the team when things go wrong and praising them when things go right. It looks like choosing principle over popularity. And that posture, it changes everything. Because people know when you're in it for you. They feel it. You can't hide it. But they also know when you care, when you serve, when you sacrifice, when you see them. And when they feel seen, they move different. They think different. They trust deeper. They contribute more. Not because you demanded it, but because you inspired it. Because you built the kind of space where people can rise. This is what servant leadership looks like. Not weakness, not passivity, but strength under control. Power that lifts. Vision that includes. Presence that holds space for people to grow. And the leaders who embody this, they build something real. Because they're not trying to be impressive. They're trying to be impactful. They're not trying to win attention. They're trying to win trust. And trust always lasts longer. It's easy to be liked for a moment. But if you're leading well, sometimes you won't be liked. Because you'll have to make decisions people don't understand. You'll have to hold standards people don't appreciate. You'll have to say no when everyone else wants a yes. And in those moments, your service is tested. Are you in this to be comfortable, or are you in this to do what's right? Are you serving your ego or your purpose? Are you leading for applause or for alignment? You don't serve to be seen. You serve because that's what leaders do. They carry the weight. They take the hits. They absorb the pressure so their people can breathe. And that kind of leadership, that kind of sacrifice, is what separates the real from the loud. And yes, it's hard. It's exhausting. It's thankless, but it's worth it. Because the impact you create when you serve is deeper than anything you'll ever achieve when you chase credit. You stop asking, what can I get from them? And start asking, what do they need from me? You stop saying, how can they help my vision? And start saying, how can I help them grow? That shift, that service, is where legacy begins. It doesn't mean you neglect yourself. It doesn't mean you become a doormat. It means you lead from strength, from groundedness, from alignment. And when you lead from that space, when service becomes your posture, you don't have to fight for influence. You earn it. And the people you serve, they remember. Maybe not right away, maybe not loudly, but they remember who was there, who showed up, who stood beside them when it mattered. And that trust, that legacy, that's the real reward. The eighth life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is that your energy is louder than your words. People hear your tone before they process your instructions. They read your presence before they trust your vision. They feel your state before they believe your strategy. And most leaders underestimate this. They prepare their slides, polish their speech, tighten up their language, but they forget to calibrate their energy. And it shows. The body says one thing, the voice says another. The message is clear, but the presence is off. You cannot lead effectively if your energy contradicts your intention, because people are paying attention, not just to what you say, but to how you say it, not just to your direction, but to your demeanor. Energy is contagious. It spreads. It multiplies. And when yours is frantic, fearful, distracted, short-tempered, uncertain, don't be surprised when your team starts to reflect the same. You've taught them to calibrate to your chaos. But when you're grounded, present, steady, even under pressure, that posture shifts the whole environment. Not because you changed your message, but because you managed your state, because you showed up in alignment. Your energy speaks before you do. It's how you walk in the room. It's how you listen. It's how you sit across from someone and make them feel safe or anxious. It's how you respond to tension, how you navigate conflict. And the leaders who understand this, who treat their energy like part of their responsibility, those are the ones who carry peace into chaos, confidence into uncertainty, clarity into confusion. But energy isn't fixed. It's not a personality trait. It's a skill. It's a choice. You don't get to say, well, this is just how I am. You don't get to use your mood as an excuse for low leadership. If you want to be taken seriously, your presence must be consistent. So how do you manage that? You manage your inputs. You take care of your mind. You take care of your body. You stop showing up fried, scattered, depleted, hoping caffeine and adrenaline will carry you through. You prepare your energy the same way you prepare your message. You get quiet before you get loud. You get present before you get productive. You remind yourself who you are before you try to move others. Because if your internal world is a mess, your leadership will be a mess. And people will feel that. Even if they don't know why, they'll feel the disconnect, the tension, the friction between what you say and what you carry. Because humans don't just process words, they process energy. And when your energy is grounded, when you walk in with clarity, not chaos, people settle, they listen, they align, they trust. And that trust, it's built faster through your presence than through your plan. Your presence teaches before you speak. Your presence tells people what's safe, what matters, what the temperature is. And if you can own that, if you can show up with aligned, strong, steady energy, you become the kind of leader people follow naturally. Not because you shouted, not because you demanded it, because you modeled it. Because your energy became the thermostat for the room, not the thermometer. You didn't react to the chaos. You regulated it. That's what real leaders do. They don't match energy. They set it. They raise it. They hold it. Especially when things are uncertain. Especially when pressure rises. Especially when emotions are high. That's when energy matters most. And you train that. You breathe when you want to react. You pause before you respond. You ground yourself before you engage. You take the time to manage your inner world so you can lead your outer world. Because your energy doesn't lie. It either confirms your message or contradicts it. And the ones who feel aligned, who carry peace, clarity, conviction, presence, those are the ones who lead long term. Those are the ones people follow when things get hard. The ninth life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is that your ability to make decisions determines the speed of your success. Not just any decisions, clear ones, timely ones, aligned ones. Because indecision is a thief. It robs momentum. It paralyzes teams. It delays everything you're trying to build. Most people don't fail because they made the wrong call. They fail because they made no call at all. They waited, they delayed, they overanalyzed. They looked for perfect instead of progress. And by the time they finally moved, the opportunity was gone. Leadership requires decisiveness. It requires the ability to assess, to trust, to commit, and then to course correct if needed. Because you can adjust a moving vehicle. You can't adjust something stuck in park. Waiting too long to decide isn't caution, it's fear. It's the fear of being wrong, the fear of being judged, the fear of failure. But that fear doesn't protect your progress. It paralyzes it. It keeps you in cycles. It keeps your team guessing. People don't follow uncertainty. They follow conviction. Even when the decision isn't perfect, a clear choice gives people something to work with. It gives them clarity. It gives them direction. And direction is what moves things forward. You're not going to get every decision right. That's not the goal. The goal is to become the kind of leader who moves with clarity, learns quickly, and adjusts when necessary. The goal is to be decisive without being arrogant, humble enough to adapt, strong enough to commit. And that balance, that takes practice. It takes repetition. You have to learn to trust your instincts, to trust your values, to trust the data, the pattern, the conversation, the voice that says, it's time, even if it's not perfect. Because you will never have 100% certainty. You will rarely have every detail you want. And if you're waiting for perfect clarity, you're already too late. The world moves too fast. Your team moves too fast. And the cost of hesitation adds up. Every time you delay, energy leaks. Every time you waffle, confidence erodes. Every time you avoid making the call, your people start making assumptions. And assumptions left unchecked will cost you far more than an imperfect decision. So you train the muscle. You start with small decisions. You remove the emotion. You ask, what's the best next step? not the perfect end result. You decide, you learn, you move again. And with every cycle, your confidence grows. Because decisiveness isn't about being right all the time. It's about being willing to take responsibility either way. It's about owning the outcome. It's about having the maturity to say, that didn't work. Here's what we're doing now. And people respect that. They don't expect you to be flawless, but they do expect you to lead. They do expect you to make the call, to take the weight, to hold the wheel when the road gets rough. You don't need to be reckless. You don't need to guess. But you do need to move. You do need to decide. Because without decisions, dreams stay dreams. Goals stay on the whiteboard. Teams stay in confusion. Progress stalls. And in those moments when you're tempted to delay, ask yourself, am I waiting for something I can't actually have? Am I hoping for more certainty than this moment will give? And if the answer is yes, then it's time to decide anyway. Because clarity comes from movement, not the other way around. You move, then you learn. You decide, then you grow. You step, then you see. And when you start living like that, everything changes. Speed increases. Confidence deepens. Your team starts trusting you more. Not because you're never wrong, but because you're never stuck. Because you don't hide behind, I'm thinking about it. Because you move with courage, with clarity, with ownership. The 10th life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is that who you surround yourself with will either raise your standard or slowly pull you off course. Because you become what you're around. You pick up the tone. You absorb the mindset. You start to mirror the habits, the language, the urgency, or the lack of it. And most people don't even realize it's happening. They think they're staying sharp, staying disciplined, staying clear, but they're doing it in an environment that makes average feel normal. That makes excuses sound reasonable. That makes laziness look acceptable. You cannot lead at a high level if your circle doesn't challenge you. You cannot maintain urgency in a room that's comfortable with delay. You cannot live with integrity in a culture that celebrates shortcuts. Eventually, you either change the room or the room changes you. That's why great leaders protect proximity. They are ruthless about who gets close. Not because they're arrogant, but because they understand influence. They understand atmosphere. They understand that energy is contagious and culture is created one conversation at a time. So they choose wisely. They choose people who hold them accountable, who push back with truth, who refuse to tolerate complacency. They don't need yes men. They need growth-minded people who value the mission more than their own comfort. And if you're serious about leading, about growing, about building something that lasts, you need to build a circle that pulls you forward, not just claps for you. A circle that sharpens your thinking, elevates your behavior, and reminds you of who you said you wanted to be. This isn't about being cold. It's about being clear, about understanding that alignment matters, that values matter, that if you spend enough time in the wrong environment, even your strongest convictions will get blurry. You don't out-discipline your environment. You design it. You build it with intention. You decide what gets close. You decide what gets your time. You decide who gets your access. And when your access gets cleaner, your energy gets sharper. And this goes beyond your inner circle. This includes what you listen to, what you read, what you consume, what you give attention to, because attention is energy, and energy is everything. And if your inputs are low quality, your leadership will be too. You can't think clearly while feeding your mind garbage. You can't lead others while entertaining cynicism. You can't bring fire into your business if all you consume is comfort and commentary. You have to protect your mind like your mission depends on it, because it does. You have to ask, who challenges me here? Who holds me accountable to my best? Who reminds me of my standard when I start slipping? Who tells me the truth when it's hard to hear? Who wants nothing from me but wants everything for me? And if you can't answer those questions, it's time to audit your circle. It's time to stop keeping people close out of history or guilt or convenience, because the cost of misaligned proximity is too high. It will drain you. It will slow you down. It will distract you from what matters. This doesn't mean you cut everyone off. It means you reposition, you reprioritize. You protect your energy without apology, because you know what you're building now. You know the weight you're carrying. You know the pace you need, and you can't afford to carry dead weight while pretending it's loyalty. Real loyalty isn't blind. It's aligned. It's honest. It grows with you. It tells you the truth. It keeps you sharp. And when you find that kind of circle, you honor it. You pour into it. You protect it, because it's rare. And when your environment is right, when the people around you are aligned with where you're going, not only do you lead better, you live lighter. You stop spending so much energy trying to resist the pull of mediocrity. You just rise together. The 11th life-changing idea for every aspiring leader is that leadership is legacy. It's not just about what you build. It's about what you leave behind. It's not just about the numbers on the board. It's about the people who got better because they were around you. Legacy isn't built in a moment. It's built in the way you treat people when there's nothing to gain. It's built in the principles you protect when no one's watching. It's built in the tone you carry, the grace you give, the truth you tell, over time, through repetition, through moments that seem small, but shape everything. And most people don't think that way. They think leadership is about scale, about speed, about attention. But real leadership thinks generationally. Real leadership thinks long-term. It asks not just, what will this decision do for me? But, what will it do for the people who come after me? That lens, that scope, changes how you move. It adds weight to your words. It sharpens your ethics. It gives your habits purpose. Because now you're not just leading for the moment. You're building something that lasts beyond it. Legacy is built in how you exit, not just how you enter. It's built in how you handle disappointment, how you carry criticism, how you navigate pressure. It's built in what people say when you're not in the room, when they're honest, when they remember. They don't remember your title. They remember how they felt around you. They remember if they could trust you, if they grew because of you, if they were stretched, sharpened, seen. That's legacy, and it's not loud. It's consistent. So you stop thinking about leadership as a destination and start thinking of it as a ripple. Every conversation, every correction, every standard you model, every belief you reinforce, it ripples, it spreads. And the more intentional you are, the more impact it carries. This means you don't chase legacy. You create it in how you love your people, in how you train them, in how you make hard calls, in how you restore trust when it's been broken, in how you carry failure, in how you walk away when the season ends. And you never know which moment matters most. That one conversation that shifts someone's mindset. That one text that reminds them of who they are. That one decision you made that becomes their blueprint later. So, you stay aware. You stay intentional. You stay present. Because leadership isn't about being impressive. It's about being impactful. It's about being the kind of person whose fingerprints are on someone else's breakthrough, whose discipline shows up in someone else's consistency, whose courage shows up in someone else's risk. And you won't always get to see the fruit. Sometimes legacy is quiet. It unfolds after you're gone. But you plant anyway. You sow with faith. You give your best because it's who you are, not because of who sees it. And when you live that way, you walk lighter. You stop needing every win to be visible. You stop craving credit because your reward isn't applause. It's alignment. It's knowing you stayed true to what matters. Legacy means you don't just rise, you lift. You don't just protect your power, you multiply it. You don't just chase success, you create succession. You don't just talk about impact, you live in a way that proves it. So ask yourself, what am I building? Who is this helping? What story will they tell about this moment, this decision, this team, this mission years from now? If your name came up, what would be attached to it? And you don't have to be famous to leave a legacy. You just have to be faithful. You just have to stay consistent. You just have to lead with depth. Because leadership that lasts is not built on noise. It's built on people. You've just been handed 11 ideas, but they're not theories. They're not tactics. They're not trendy hacks to boost your image or increase your likes. They're principles, anchors, foundations for a kind of leadership that lasts, a kind of leadership that doesn't just succeed, it sustains. And if you're serious about becoming someone people can trust, someone people can follow, someone people remember, you don't just memorize these ideas, you embody them. You take them from notes to behavior, from inspiration to habit, from speech to standard. Because leadership isn't proven by what you say in the good times. It's proven by how you respond in the hard times. And those hard times, they're coming. But if you've built these values into your life, you won't fold. You'll rise. You'll lead. You'll carry others when they're too tired to carry themselves. You lead yourself before you lead anyone else. You prioritize clarity before speed. You choose consistency over hype. You reinforce culture with your behavior, not your branding. You protect your energy like your future depends on it. You invite feedback. You value service. You manage your presence. You make decisions with courage. You choose alignment over approval. And you remember every day that leadership is legacy. You're not just building a career. You're building a story, a reputation, a standard. And every day you show up, every conversation you have, every decision you make, it's adding to that story. It's either confirming your integrity or calling it into question. So you get intentional. You get rooted. You raise your standard and you live it, no matter who's watching. You decide that leadership isn't about noise. It's about depth. It's about the kind of character that doesn't shake in storms, the kind of presence that makes others feel safe. And when it gets hard, because it will, you come back to these ideas. You remember that real leaders serve. They don't shout. They show up. They don't wait to be chosen. They step up. They don't ask, who will give me permission? They say, who needs me to be ready? And they move without hype, without drama, without needing to be seen, because they know that true leadership is felt long before it's applauded, and legacy is written long before it's ever celebrated. So carry these ideas with you. Don't let them fade when the video ends. Don't let them sit in a notebook. Build them into your life. Let them shape your voice, your habits, your posture. Let them influence how you listen, how you lead, how you live. Because the world doesn't need more talkers. It needs more leaders, the kind who carry weight, the kind who stand tall, the kind who model what it means to lead from the inside out. Not once, not when it's easy, but daily, relentlessly, quietly, consistently.